It all started with a letter, a cold, quiet night in Castle Black when Jon Snow, brooding as always, was reading the latest message from the south. But this one wasn't just any letter. It was from an old friend of his father's, someone Jon never thought he'd hear from. The letter said Robert Baratheon was alive. Not just alive, but hiding, planning, and ready to strike back. Jon didn't want to believe it at first. Robert had died years ago, hadn't he? Poisoned by wine and pigs. But this message had details, things only the real Robert could have known. And more than that, it carried a name at the end that made Jon's heart freeze. Ned Stark. The letter claimed Ned had survived that dungeon, though badly injured, and had been rescued in secret by a few loyal guards. Cersei had faked his execution to keep power while keeping him locked away somewhere. But now, thanks to a secret rebellion forming in the shadows, Robert and Ned were back together, and they needed Jon's help. That same night, Jon broke his vows. He left the wall with only Ghost and 2 trusted Night's Watch brothers, riding hard toward the Riverlands. He didn't care what the Night's Watch would say. The war in the south wasn't just politics anymore. It was family. On the way, he met a small group of riders, cloaked in Baratheon colors black and gold. One of them dismounted and pulled his hood down. It was Robert Baratheon. Older, rougher, a scar across his jaw, but unmistakably him. "Jon Snow," he said in his deep, growling voice. "Or should I say, Stark?" Jon didn't reply. His heart was thudding too loud to speak. Robert slapped him on the shoulder, then handed him a wineskin. "No time to stand around like ghosts. War's coming again. And you're going to help stop a massacre." It turned out Robert had heard about the Red Wedding plan through Varys, who had sent word of Walder Frey's betrayal. Catelyn and Robb were walking into a trap, and unless someone stopped it, they would die. Robert didn't want another dead Stark. He owed Ned too much. So, together, they rode. A small group of men, moving fast under the moonlight. Robert, Jon, a few Baratheon loyalists, and a single man in robes who called himself the Whisper, Varys's agent. They reached the twins 2 nights before the wedding. Everything looked normal from the outside. Tents, music, laughter. But something felt wrong. Too many armed guards, too many smiles that didn't reach the eyes. That night, Robert gathered everyone in a small, abandoned farmhouse near the river. The plan was simple, but dangerous. "Tomorrow," Robert growled, "we crash the wedding before the Freys can strike. We expose the truth, and if they don't listen, we fight." Jon looked him dead in the eyes. "And if Robb won't believe us?" Robert's smile faded. "Then we save him anyway, just like I tried to save your father." Jon barely slept that night. He kept seeing images of blood of his mother, whom he never knew, of his siblings scattered across Westeros, of Robb dying in a hall of betrayal. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not to another Stark. The next evening came quickly. The wedding was loud, full of music and toasts. Catelyn was tense. Robb was trying to enjoy the moment. Talisa sat beside him, glowing, unaware of what was planned behind the walls. That's when Jon slipped in, wearing the armor of a Frey soldier. Ghost was hidden nearby, ready to strike on command. And Robert? He waited outside the main gate, with a battering ram and 20 armed men. The Red Wedding was about to begin, but this time Jon Snow was inside. And he wasn't there to watch. The hall was glowing with candlelight. People were laughing, drinking, and dancing, but Jon Snow felt nothing but tension in his chest. The smell of roasted meat, spilt wine, and wet stone filled the air. His fake Frey armor itched against his skin, and he kept his hand close to the hidden dagger inside his belt. He was moving carefully through the crowd, scanning everything, the corners, the walls, the soldiers pretending to be drunk. He saw Walder Frey at the high table, that twisted smirk never leaving his face. His eyes were like a snake's, watching, waiting. Jon looked toward Robb. He sat beside Talisa, smiling at her, unaware of how close death truly was. His direwolf, Grey Wind, was locked outside in the cages. John had already seen it. That alone told him this wasn't just paranoia. It was a trap. He whispered softly to a serving girl passing by. She flinched when he grabbed her wrist, but calmed when he leaned in and said, "Go to the Lady Catelyn. Tell her this. The North remembers. The wolf is not alone. She'll understand." The girl blinked, confused, but John nodded, serious. She hurried toward the table. Now, he just had to wait for Robert. Outside, Robert Baratheon was furious. The guards at the gate refused to let him in. "Wedding's private," they said. Robert held a false invitation, signed by Walder Frey himself, another piece forged by Varys's men. "I don't care if the gods themselves are getting married inside," Robert shouted. "I'm coming in." Still, the guards didn't move. So Robert grinned, stepped back, and gave the signal. The battering ram smashed the gate open like thunder. Screams broke out, horses neighed, Frey men rushed toward the chaos, but Robert's men were faster. Within seconds, the outer courtyard of the twins was in chaos, swords clashing, arrows flying. Inside the hall, the music stopped. Then came the screams from outside. Robb stood up quickly. "What in the seven hells?" Walder Frey's fake politeness dropped like a mask. "Sit down, boy," he spat. "It's already too late." And that's when John acted. He pulled off his helmet, tossed it aside, and shouted, "Robb, it's a trap. Get your sword." At the same time, several Frey soldiers drew their weapons. One went for Talisa. John threw his dagger across the room, straight into the man's neck. Blood sprayed across the wedding table. Chaos erupted. Robb unsheathed his sword. Catelyn screamed, dragging Talisa away. Crossbowmen appeared from the shadows above, but John was already sprinting toward the stairs. "Ghost!" he yelled. The hall doors burst open, and the direwolf came flying in like a beast from the old gods. His eyes red, his fur soaked, his fangs tearing into the nearest Frey soldier. Everything turned into madness. The music was gone, replaced by steel and screams. Walder Frey tried to escape, but Catelyn caught him by the collar. "You planned this," she hissed, pressing a knife to his throat. His face turned pale. Robb fought like the king he was born to be. Every movement was sharp, every strike deadly. John stood beside him, back to back, just like two brothers on the battlefield. Robert finally stormed in, covered in blood, laughing like a madman. "I miss this," he roared, swinging his warhammer into a guard's skull. The fight didn't last long. Most of the Frey men weren't expecting real resistance. They were cowards, hiding behind crossbows. Once they realized the tables had turned, many dropped their weapons and ran. In the end, Walder Frey knelt before Robb Stark, blood dripping from his mouth, his hair matted with sweat. He looked like a drowned rat. Catelyn wanted him dead. So did John. But Robb, panting, his sword trembling in his grip, said, "Lock him in his own dungeon. Let him rot where he planned to bury us." And that was the end of the Red Wedding. But it wasn't the end of the war, because word would spread about how Robb Stark had survived death, how Robert Baratheon had returned from the grave, and how Jon Snow had broken every oath for the family he never knew he had. And in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister would hear the whispers. The North had bitten back, and the wolves were now hunting. The sun hadn't even risen, but word of what happened at the twins was already spreading like wildfire. The Red Wedding had turned into the Red Reckoning. Robb Stark lived. Jon Snow had returned, and Robert Baratheon was not dead. Inside the castle, the mood was bitter. Blood still stained the floors. Frey men were chained in the dungeons, some whimpering, some still cursing. Jon stood outside the hall, watching ghosts tear apart leftover food like it was flesh. The dire wolf had saved more than just lives that night. He had torn the heart out of betrayal. Robb walked over, still wearing blood on his armor. He didn't look like a young king anymore. He looked older, colder. "You knew?" Robb asked quietly. "You knew this would happen?" John nodded slowly. "Robert got word. Varys sent a raven. I couldn't let them kill you." Robb's eyes flicked toward Ghost. "You broke your vows for us." "I broke them the day I realized I'd never be just a brother in black," John said. "Not when the people I care about are dying in the south." Robb said nothing, but he put a hand on John's shoulder, tight, strong, like a brother who didn't know how to say thank you. Inside, Robert Baratheon was pacing like a caged lion. He slammed a goblet down on the Frey's long table, wine splashing everywhere. "We're not done. The Lannisters will come for blood. They'll call this treason, assassination, whatever they can. Cersei's going to spit fire." Catelyn, sitting nearby, looked weary. "Then let her," she said. "Let her choke on her lies. We have a chance now, a real one. We strike back." Robert raised an eyebrow. "You think it's that easy? You think Tywin Lannister won't march his gold-armored bastards here the moment he hears his allies failed?" "He won't," said a voice from the doorway. All heads turned. A man in golden armor stood there, no helmet, no sigil on his chest, just a sword sheathed in red leather. It was Jaime Lannister. John grabbed his sword instantly. Robb did too, but Jaime raised his hands. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk," Robert growled. "I don't talk to kingslayers." Jaime ignored him. "Tywin Lannister is dead." The room went silent. "No one killed him," Jaime said slowly. "He died in his sleep. Poison, they say, or maybe his heart just gave out. Either way, Cersei rules now." Catelyn stood. "And why should we believe anything from your mouth?" "Because I'm not with Cersei," Jaime said, looking at her not cruelly, not arrogantly, but tired. "She's burning everything. She's turning King's Landing into a pit of vipers. She wants to crown Tommen, but he's a child." The small council's terrified of her. John stepped forward. "Why are you here?" "To make a deal," Jaime said. "Let me take my men and leave. In return, I'll give you something you want more than Frey, gold, or Lannister titles." He stepped aside, and a figure walked into the room, hooded, limping slightly. It was Ned Stark, alive. Catelyn gasped, like her soul left her body. Robb dropped his sword. John's knees almost buckled. Ned's beard was longer, his face gaunt, but his eyes, those were still the eyes of the man who raised them. "I didn't die," he said softly. "Varys helped me escape. I've been hiding ever since. I couldn't send word. It was too dangerous." Catelyn rushed to him, gripping his face with trembling hands. "I saw your head, I thought." "They lied," Ned whispered. "Just like they always do." Robert stepped back, staring like he'd seen a ghost. "Ned, you old, stubborn wolf." They embraced like warriors, like brothers, like men who had once dreamed of peace. But the moment was short, because outside the walls of the twins, horns began to blow. A scout rushed in. A Lannister host approaches from the south, fast riders, heavy banners. Thousands of men. Robb turned to his father. "What do we do?" Ned's voice was calm, strong. "We fight." "And Jon Snow?" He stepped forward, sword in hand, eyes cold as the north. "We end this war," he said. The ground shook with the sound of thousands of hooves. The banners of House Lannister, gold lion on crimson, spread across the horizon like blood on snow. Their campfires lit the woods south of the twins. This wasn't a small force. It was an army. And at the head of it, wearing gold plate armor and a black lion's cloak, was Sir Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother, now leading in his place. Inside the castle, Ned Stark stood tall again, dressed in northern armor for the first time in years. His face had aged, but his presence hadn't. "Kevan's no fool," he said. "He'll want to avoid bloodshed if he can. He'll expect us to surrender." "He doesn't know we have Robert Baratheon," Jon said quietly. "Or that you're alive." Robert grunted, leaning over a map. We can't hold the twins against them forever. The Freys are broken, but their castle's too narrow. We'll be trapped if they attack from both sides. So, what do we do? Robb asked, trying not to show the worry on his face. We can't just run. No, Ned said firmly. We ride to River Run, gather every loyal house that remains. We show them that the North is not broken, that the rightful king is alive, and the Starks stand together. Robert slammed a fist on the table. Good, then we take the war to Cersei. Jaime Lannister, standing near the window, smirked. You really think the realm will cheer for you, for Ned Stark? He's been dead for years in their eyes. You're just old names in a world that's moved on. Jon turned to him. And you? Why are you still here? Jaime shrugged. I've got nowhere else to go. King's Landing isn't home anymore. And to be honest, I'm curious. Curious to see if the wolves still know how to bite. Outside, the Lannister host began setting up siege towers. Time was running out. That night, Jon stood alone on the battlements, staring into the dark. Ghost lay beside him, growling low under his breath, sensing the danger. Robb joined him, his eyes also fixed on the enemy campfires. You saved me, Jon, he said quietly. But this war isn't over, not even close. Jon didn't look away. We need more than swords. We need people to believe in something again. In the North. In our name. Robb sighed. Sometimes I think, maybe I wasn't meant to be king. You are, Jon said firmly. But you're not alone anymore. The next morning, before the sun rose, the gates of the twins creaked open. A single rider stepped out under a white flag. It was Ned Stark. The Lannister soldiers paused, confused, unsure if it was a trick. Kevan Lannister rode forward with a small group, armor clinking, expression wary. Ned raised his voice. I am Lord Eddard Stark, Warden of the North. I live. I stand with my son, King Robb Stark, and with Robert Baratheon. I offer this chance, turn back, or we will fight. Kevan narrowed his eyes. This is madness. You're supposed to be dead. I was, Ned said coldly. Your family made sure of that. But you failed. Kevan looked at him for a long moment, then said, You're outnumbered. Ned nodded. Perhaps, but you're not just fighting men, you're fighting ghosts. Ghosts of your crimes, your lies, your betrayals. You think you've broken us? His voice turned sharp. The North remembers. Kevan didn't answer. He turned and rode back to his camp. No words, no agreement. The message was clear. The war was still on. Back inside the castle, Jon prepared for battle, sword sharpened, armor strapped, Ghost by his side. As dawn broke, horns blew. The Lannister army was moving. But before their first line could reach the gates, a blast of horn echoed from the east. Another army was coming. Banners flew high in the wind, a trout leaping from water. House Tully. River Run had come. Behind them, banners of House Blackwood, Bracken, Mallister. Northern houses once scattered, now answering Robb's call. The Red Wedding had failed, and now the realm was rising. Jon looked at Robb and smiled faintly. Seems we're not done yet. And as swords clashed and the battlefield filled with smoke and fury, one truth was clear. The wolves were no longer running. They were hunting. The battlefield outside the twins was chaos. Arrows rained from the sky, swords clashed, men screamed and died in mud and blood. But the tide was turning fast. With the arrival of the Tully forces, Robb's army doubled in strength. The North and Riverlands had become one again. Jon fought like a storm. Ghost tore through enemy lines beside him, a white shadow of death. The Freys who tried to escape were cut down without mercy. Jon's sword found steel and flesh with every swing. He wasn't just fighting for Robb or Ned, he was fighting for every Stark who'd bled under Lannister lies. Above the battlefield, Robb Stark led from the front. His bannermen followed close behind, Great John Umber roaring like a bear, Edmure Tully finally proving himself in battle, and even Robert Baratheon swinging his warhammer like the days of old. Jaime Lannister, however, stood watching from a small hill. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He simply watched the world he once ruled fall apart. By nightfall, the Lannister army had scattered. Kevan Lannister was captured. Hundreds were dead. The rest fled back south with broken banners and blood-stained armor. But the cost was heavy. Jon stood over the body of one of his Night's Watch brothers, Grenn, who had followed him down from the wall, killed by a spear through the ribs. Jon closed his friend's eyes and muttered, "You didn't die in black, you died a wolf." Robb walked through the battlefield, searching for the wounded. His crown was gone, knocked off during the fight, but no one questioned his rule now. He looked like a king not just by blood, but by fire and survival. Later that night, in the great hall of the twins, now cleaned of blood and corpses, the leaders gathered. Ned Stark stood at the head of the table once more. Robert Baratheon drank deeply, silent for once. Catelyn sat beside her husband, her eyes tired but filled with fire. They were planning their next move. "The war isn't over," Ned said. "Not while Cersei wears the crown." "She won't give it up," Catelyn said bitterly. "Not even if Tommen is just a boy." "She won't need to," Jaime said from the corner. He leaned back, looking distant. "Cersei doesn't plan to keep Tommen safe. She plans to use him as a shield, as a tool, then discard him." Robb slammed his fist on the table. "So we take King's Landing?" Robert shook his head. "Not yet. We need the Stormlands, the Vale, the Reach, if we can turn them. Go in now, and we'll be crushed by gold and fire." "Fire?" Jon asked, confused. Robert narrowed his eyes. "There are rumors, whispers from the east. Cersei's looking for something ancient, something dangerous." Ned looked at him. "Like what?" "Dragonfire," Robert said darkly. Everyone froze. "You mean the wildfire the Mad King kept beneath the city?" Jon asked. Robert nodded. "And worse. She's digging up the past old pyromancers, forgotten books. If she finds what she's looking for, she'll burn the whole realm to ash just to stay queen." Jon stood. "Then we don't wait. We go to the Vale. Lady Arryn owes us. Sansa is still there. We get their knights. We unite the North, Riverlands, Stormlands. Then we march." "And if Dawn joins her?" Ned asked. Robert gave a humorless laugh. "Then we remind them what happened the last time they backed the wrong side." A silence followed. Then Catelyn spoke. "What about Arya?" Everyone looked at her. Jon swallowed hard. "Last I heard she was missing. Some say she was in the Riverlands. Others say Bravos." Ned's face darkened. "She's alive. I can feel it." "She's a Stark," Jon said quietly. "She'll find her way home." At that moment, a scout burst into the hall, out of breath. "My lords," he said, "a raven just arrived from the wall." Everyone turned sharply. The scout hesitated, then added, "It's from Maester Aemon, and it's not about the war." Jon stepped forward. "Then what?" The scout looked straight at him. "He says the dead are walking." The hall went quiet. Not from fear, but from something colder, something heavier. Jon Snow took the raven scroll from the scout's shaking hand. It bore the old seal of Castle Black, broken open, ink still wet. He read it once, then again, then looked up. "They've breached the wall." Robert Baratheon narrowed his eyes. "Who?" Jon's voice was low. "The White Walkers, the dead." At first, no one spoke. Edmure shifted uncomfortably. Robb looked confused. Only Ned and Catelyn watched Jon's face closely. "They were myths," Robb finally said. "They're not myths," Jon replied. "I've seen them. I fought one, cut it down with Longclaw, and now they're coming through." Ned turned to the scout. "What else did Maester Aemon say?" The boy hesitated. He said, The wall fell near Eastwatch. 100 dead men came with ice in their eyes. The watch held them off, but barely. They've never seen anything like it. John closed the scroll. He says we need to choose. The throne or the realm. Robert laughed bitterly. Old Eamon always knew how to be dramatic, but Ned's face didn't change. He's right, Catelyn frowned. You can't be serious. We just saved Robb from a butcher's table. You want us to march north now? John looked at her. I want us to survive. Robb stepped forward, jaw tight. We abandon King's Landing, Cersei wins. Everything we've done, everything we lost, it's for nothing. No, John said. Cersei doesn't win if there's no one left to rule. Robert poured more wine. I told you years ago, Ned, winter is coming. And now, it's here. Jaime leaned back in his chair. So what? You want to go play hero in the snow while the Queen burns the south? No, Ned said. We split. Robb turned sharply. What? We split our strength, Ned continued. You take the Riverlands and march south. Rally the Vale, Stormlands, maybe even the Reach, if Marjorie Tyrell still draws breath. Let Cersei fight on 2 fronts. And you? Robb asked. Ned turned to John. We go north. Take as many men as we can spare. Warn the remaining watch. Fortify Winterfell. Winterfell's in ruins, Catelyn reminded him. Then we rebuild it in the shadow of death, John said. Robert stood, slamming his goblet down. Fine. Let the old ghosts out. I'll ride with the wolves this time. One last time. That night, fires burned across the twins as plans were made, letters sent, banners divided. John found himself standing outside, in the courtyard, sharpening Longclaw. Robb joined him. You really believe this is worse than the Lannisters? John looked at him. They want the throne. These things, they don't want anything. Just death. They don't march. They spread. Robb nodded slowly. I'm sorry I doubted you. John smiled faintly. I'm used to it. You think we'll see each other again? Robb asked. John didn't answer right away. I don't know, he said finally. But I hope so. They embraced like true brothers, and neither said goodbye, because they both knew what goodbyes meant in war. 3 weeks later, John rode across the snows of the north, Ghost at his side, black cloaks flapping in the freezing wind. Behind him marched nearly 4,000 men from the north and Riverlands. Ned rode beside him, older but fierce, eyes always watching the woods, and Robert rode up front, not as fast as before, but just as loud, laughing as snow fell on his beard. Winterfell came into view, barely standing. Burned roofs, cracked towers, a broken heart waiting to beat again. But John didn't see just ruins. He saw a home. They started rebuilding the moment they arrived. Fires lit in the great hall, walls repaired, blacksmiths worked day and night. Ravens flew to the last loyal bannermen, Manderley, Reed, even the wild mountain clans. And in the night, the air turned colder. Strange things happened. Horses went missing. Tracks appeared bare feet in the snow where no man walked. Men started whispering about shadows near the tree line. John knew the signs. The storm was coming. One morning, as John stood atop the battlements, watching the forests, Ghost suddenly growled low and fierce. His white fur bristled. John turned and saw a figure in the woods, tall, thin, skin like frost, eyes like cold fire. A White Walker. It watched him, and then it vanished into the trees. John turned to the horn tower. Sound it. The horn blew once, then twice, then a third time, and all of Winterfell froze, because now they knew. Death had come to the north. The sound of the third horn still echoed across the courtyard when panic swept through Winterfell like wind through dry leaves. Men dropped tools, horses reared, eyes wide with fear. Even the fires seemed to shrink. Jon Snow stood on the battlements, staring at the spot where the White Walker had disappeared. His breath came out in white clouds, his heart beat hard but steady. He had seen death before, but this was different. This was ancient, cold, patient. Ned reached the wall. Seconds later, Robert following behind him with a warhammer already in his hands. "What did you see?" Ned asked. Jon didn't look away from the trees. "One of them, a walker, watching us." Robert spit into the snow. "Good. Let the icy bastard come. I'll smash him to bits." Jon gave him a tired look. "Your hammer won't work. Only dragon glass or Valyrian steel." Robert blinked. "You're joking." "I'm not." Ned frowned. "Then it means they're testing us. They know we're here." "No," Jon whispered. "They know we're afraid." That night, Winterfell slept lightly. Fires burned bright along the walls. Guards rotated every hour, and Ghost prowled non-stop, eyes glowing. But Jon couldn't sleep. He sat in the godswood, near the heart tree, Longclaw across his knees. Snow drifted from the branches above, quiet and soft. The red leaves of the weirwood moved gently in the cold wind like slow-burning flames. Ned approached from behind. "You should rest." Jon shook his head. "They'll attack soon, and we're not ready." Ned sat beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ned said softly, "You remind me of Benjen, always worrying for others more than yourself." Jon's voice cracked slightly. "I miss him." "So do I." Jon stared at the carved face of the heart tree. "Do you think the gods are watching, or have they left us too?" "The gods don't leave," Ned whispered. "People do." A silence stretched between them. Then Jon asked the question he'd kept buried. "Do you think I made a mistake? Leaving the wall? Breaking my vows?" Ned's reply came immediately. "No. A man knows his duty, and your duty was never to the stones of the wall, but to the living." Jon swallowed hard. "Robb will fight a different war, 1,000 miles away." "Your brother was born to lead men," Ned said. "You were born to protect them." Jon didn't answer. But something in him steadied. The next morning brought more dread. Tracks appeared outside the walls, circles, spirals, shapes carved into the snow with inhuman precision. Men swore they heard whispers in the wood. A rider sent north never returned. Robert slammed his fist on a table in the great hall. "We can't sit here waiting. We ride out and crush them." "We ride into a trap," Jon said calmly. "The walkers want us outside, where the cold helps them." Ned nodded. "Winterfell is stone, fire, safety. We hold." Robert grumbled loudly, but didn't argue again. Then came another blow. A raven from the south. Robb had reached the Vale, but not alone. He had met Sansa, alive, safe. But the letter carried something darker beneath the good news. Cersei was not retreating. She had sent Euron Greyjoy to the narrow sea with a fleet of black ironborn ships. She was gathering wildfire. She had ordered executions in the streets. And worst of all, she had declared Robb Stark and anyone who supported him enemies of the crown. Jon read the letter twice, then burned it, not out of anger, out of fear. Fear for what Cersei would do when she learned about the dead. That night, the attack finally came. The winds howled like dying wolves, the sky turned black, snow fell sideways in thick, blinding sheets, fires flickered wildly. Jon was on the wall when he saw them first. Dead men, hundreds, walking through the storm, faces pale, eyes blue, movements unbroken, unstoppable. Behind them, tall shapes moved, white walkers, their armor frozen and sharp, their spears glinting. Jon shouted, "Archers, ready!" Flaming arrows shot into the storm only to be swallowed by wind and snow. The dead kept coming. Robert roared from the courtyard, "Come on then, face me!" Ned barked orders. Men formed ranks. Shields lifted. Ghost growled deeply, teeth bared, fur bristling. Then the gates shook. Once, twice, a third time, and shattered inward. The dead flooded through like a wave of darkness. John raised Longclaw. Robert lifted his hammer. Ned drew ice, a sword long as a man. And the battle for Winterfell began in fire and blood and freezing wind. Winterfell was drowning in war. Snow mixed with blood on the stone. The dead poured through the shattered gate like floodwater, cold, silent, endless. Their eyes glowed blue. Their bodies, some fresh, some rotted, moved with one purpose: kill the living. Jon Snow was in the middle of it all. Longclaw in his hand, Ghost at his side, he fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. His blade sliced through undead flesh, each strike followed by fire or frost. But for every one he killed, 3 more took its place. Robert Baratheon was a thunderstorm. His warhammer crushed skulls and shattered bones. He roared curses as if shouting back death itself. But even he, the great warrior king, was slowing. He was older, his breath heavier. Ned Stark fought with ice, the massive Valyrian steel sword that once passed judgment in peace, now roaring through undead necks. But his eyes never left Jon, not for long. He watched his son like a man who had already lost too many. And then the horn blew again. Once, long, deep. The Northmen knew the sound. It meant more were coming. Jon stood atop the steps of Winterfell's great hall, looking into the storm. And through the snow they came. Giants, dead giants, their skin blue-grey, their eyes glowing, massive clubs in hand. They smashed through the walls like paper. Men screamed, horses ran wild. One northern soldier was crushed beneath a falling tower. Jon shouted, "Dragons, light the sky!" And just as the dead climbed the walls, a burst of fire exploded from above. Drogon and Rhaegal screamed through the air, wings wide, breathing fire onto the army of the dead. Behind them, a third dragon, smaller, greyer, but fast joined the attack. Daenerys Targaryen had come. On Drogon's back, her silver hair flying wild, she dove low, torching the outer fields of Winterfell. Fire roared across snow. Screams turned to silence as hundreds of the dead turned to ash. Jon's heart twisted. He hadn't seen her in over a year. Now she was here, burning death beside him. But it wasn't just Daenerys. Behind her came the army of the Vale Knights in shining armor, led by Sansa Stark and Lord Royce, and with them Arya, alive, grown, dressed in leather, a blade of Valyrian steel at her side. She moved through the chaos like a shadow, stabbing White Walkers in the back of the neck, vanishing into the smoke. Winterfell had become hell itself, fire above, ice below. The ground cracked with magic, the skies screamed with dragons, and still the Night King had not yet shown his face. Until now, from the woods beyond the battlefield, he appeared. Tall, pale, armor of ice, blue fire in his eyes. He walked slowly through the flames, untouched. And behind him, the remaining dead rallied. They did not burn. They obeyed. He raised his hand. And more bodies rose. Dead men Jon had just fought beside. Now, walking again. Ned charged toward the Night King with ice raised, but the Night King flicked his wrist. Ice shattered. The great sword that had passed judgment for generations exploded in Ned's hands. The blast threw him to the ground. "No!" Jon screamed. He charged, blade ready, but the Night King summoned his own sword of ice and blocked Jon's strike like it was nothing. Their blades clashed steel and magic, fire and death. But Jon was slowing, tired, bleeding. His shoulder burned from an earlier slash. The Night King was patient, cold, and precise. And then a blur moved behind the Night King. Arya. She leapt through the air, silent, dagger in hand. But the Night King turned too fast. He caught her by the throat, lifted her off the ground. Jon screamed. Arya dropped the dagger, but caught it again with her other hand, and drove it into his chest, right through the icy heart. Silence. The Night King stared, then cracked, shattered into 1,000 frozen pieces. Every dead soldier dropped at once. The giants, the wights, the howling beasts, all collapsed like puppets cut from string. The snow stopped, and Winterfell fell into silence. Hours passed. Bodies were burned, tears were shed. The cost had been enormous. Robert Baratheon sat against a wall, covered in wounds, laughing softly. "I always said winter would kill me." Ned Stark sat beside him, holding his hand. But not today. Jon walked the halls, searching for faces he loved. He found Sansa, who hugged him tight. He found Arya, staring into the flames, quiet but alive. And then he saw Daenerys. She walked to him slowly. Her eyes were tired but warm. "You looked like a dragon out there," he said. "And you looked like a ghost," she smiled. They didn't kiss. They just stood together. In the ruins of Winterfell, where the dead had fallen, where the living stood together.